Okay, I am gonna go ahead and start recording. And let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. Good morning, everybody. I am Jennifer Mayo. I'm the 4-H educator in Spencer County in Indiana. And we have Brooke on this morning too. Brooke is our 4-H educator in Pike County. So we're so excited that you're all here with us this morning. Ovid is going to be our speaker this morning. And I'm lucky I've known Ovid for a really, really long time. And they are a great family. So I am going to turn this over to Ovid. If you have questions, if you all want to go ahead and mute for the beginning part. And then if you have questions as we're cooking, you can either put them in the chat box or you can unmute and ask them. Sometimes it works better in the chat box just because we're all on different speeds of internet. But if you have questions, please make sure and ask. Brooke and I will monitor the chat box. And we are excited to have you all this morning. So Ovid, we will turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I hope you've all had a wonderful week and are having a wonderful weekend. Today we're going to be making something called medovik. And medovik is sort of like, it's like a honey cake. It's sort of originally from Ukraine and sort of proliferated throughout Eastern Europe and into the Caucasus. That's actually where my father's from, Armenia. It's a big thing there too. And it's sort of popular in that region. And there's so many different sort of variations of it. There's some with caramel, some with chocolate, some that put sorts of different types of nuts in it, some with like banana puree. So a bunch of different variations, but this is the original one from the 60s. So here, I'm gonna rotate my camera here, and I'm gonna give a quick call out for all ingredients. And I've got both weight measurements and measurements for if you're using cups and stuff. So I'll give a quick call out of those so y'all have all that ready, just to make sure. So we've got 3 eggs, 150 grams of sugar or 2/3 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon baking soda, 400 grams of flour or 3 cups of flour, 4 tablespoons of honey, 100 grams of butter, or that's just 1 stick of butter, 500 grams sour cream or 2 1/2 cups of sour cream, but that amount varies based on how much filling you want. If you're not, I find that around like 1 cup, a little less, a little more works for me with, and then varying the amount of condensed milk. But that's just the sort of base amounts. You can vary that based on how much filling you'd like. And we've got 100 grams of condensed milk, which is approximately 1/3, 1/2 of the can. So
There.
Okay.
Okay. Now you.
Okay. What here? I don't know where to put my phone.
Was I muted? Hello?
Nope, you're good.
Alrighty. So I'm gonna go ahead and point our camera down and get started. So I've got a medium saucepan here, and I'm going to add our sugar to it. And I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna have breaks in between just to allow everyone to catch up. So I'll ask if everyone's caught up, and then we'll sort of move on from there. So I'm gonna add our sugar to the pot or to the saucepan. I've got 3 eggs here. I'm gonna crack all 3 into the saucepan too. Got to be careful not to get eggshell because I'm notorious for leaving eggshell in all the stuff I make eggs with. So I'm gonna be careful to not do that. Here we go, 2. And we got 3 here. Okay. I'm gonna go wash my hands off real quick. I'll be right back. Alrighty, once we've got our sugar and eggs in, we're gonna add our butter. About 1 stick. You can chop it up before you put it in the pan, but I find that it's better to just let it heat a little bit, and then you can cut it easily with like a wooden spoon while it's in the pan. But it'll all melt together regardless of whether you cut it or not. I just find it's easier to stir when you cut it. So we've got our stick of butter in there. Ooh, that does not want to get out. There we go. Okay. And then we've got we're gonna want 4 tablespoons of honey. I like to go a little bit more with the honey. I like to do 5 tablespoons, but if you really like that honey flavor to come through, you can add 5 tablespoons, maybe even 6. But for me, I'm just gonna do 5 because I really like the honey flavor. How I find it's easy to measure honey is it's leaving this right here at about like I think like 1 tablespoon per like second. So if you're counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. So if you count about 5 really long seconds or 4 really long seconds, you can get about the right amount of honey in there, and you're squeezing pretty hard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a little more. There we go. And a little more too. There we go. Remember, long seconds. Alrighty. So that was sort of our first part of our process. I'm gonna look at the Zoom real quick and make sure we've got everyone caught up to where we are. There we go.
Give a thumbs up if you are good, or if in the comment section kind of put if you're right with us.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
They're just adding their eggs and butter now. It looks like.
Alrighty. Nice, nice. Alrighty. And when we get to sort of periods of sort of when we're having our cake batter or our cake to bake, or we're having stuff on the stove and we're stirring, I'm gonna give a little bit of history about Medovik, its origin, sort of when it became popular, and how it got to where it is today. And some interesting people surrounding the history of Medovik. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start us moving on to our next thing. Bring my computer with me. So we are going to be heading over to the stove with our saucepan now. Adding the honey, nice.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep. Yep.
It says here adding baking soda. When do you do that?
So
It
the
doesn't
baking,
say on.
so the baking soda we're gonna add. So we're gonna cook this mixture right here until the butter's melted, everything's combined, and then after we've cooked that for a while, we're going to add our baking soda. Now some people won't add baking soda to this recipe, but the largest amount of people, sort of like the majority recipes, add the baking soda. So we're gonna do about our 1 teaspoon of baking soda to this. If you don't have baking soda on hand with you or in your house, that's fine, but it works better with the baking soda. So we're gonna cook this and then we'll add the baking soda after this is all combined and we've cooked it for a little bit, and I'll let you guys know when. And then we'll move on from there, if that sounds good. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Didn't say
No
anything
problem.
about that on the recipe.
Alrighty. So let me get my thing here. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to cooking this mixture here. Okay. So we're gonna want to heat it on pretty low heat. If you've got a stove top like that's not a gas stove top, I like to put it on settings 3 or 4, but just in general, you're gonna want to put it on pretty low heat while you're cooking this. And we're gonna continue to stir this until we've got the butter melted and everything combined. So And while this is cooking, I'm gonna give a bit of history on let me get this slide on Medivik. So yeah, let me try and turn this. There we go. Okay. So Medivik, the original story of Medivik, and this is sort of a contested story. The original story is that it's sort of from the Russian courts of like before the communist revolution in 1918. So originally, it was said that and excuse me if I mispronounce this name, Elizaveta Alexeyevna, who was the wife of Alexander I, hated honey. She absolutely despised it. She couldn't stand the smell. She said if it got anywhere near her, she would get sick. So a real sort of like just hatred of honey almost. And so a young chef who was sort of hired on to her cooking staff was he did not know about this. He was sort of new, no one had told him. And so when he went to make her a cake, he made her a cake with this honey in it, right? And it was similar to the Medivik we're making here. And so we served it to the king for to the queen for one of their dinners. And the queen tried it and she absolutely adored it. She did not know there was honey in it. She demanded it for every meal afterwards. And so that was sort of the legend of the cake. Now this historically is sort of contested, but it's, in my opinion, I think it's a fun story. I love sort of the stories behind cooking. There's so many different stories. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but there's sort of folk stories behind every dish. And you can find them pretty much about everything. But I love these folk stories in cooking. But anyways, this dish back then at least would have only been served to like if you're really, really at the top there. If you're like one of the nobles in the court or if you're close to the king, you're only seeing this sort of stuff there. But for the common person, you're not really seeing much of Medivik or any sort of cake for that matter. Now, when we get to about here, let me do a little checkup on everyone. Is everyone doing all right? Do we have any questions? Where's everyone at right now? Are we all on the stovetop right now? Or some of us might be behind maybe? Where are we all at? Butter still melting? Okay, that's where I'm at too.
Can everybody give a thumbs up if you're melting your butter on the stove?
The baking soda. So the baking soda is added after we've got the butter melted, and after we've got the butter melted and we've cooked this mixture for a little bit. I'll tell you all when. It should be all combined. There should be no streaks of egg or butter or anything. It's all combined into one thing. After that, we're gonna add the baking soda, and I'll let you all know when, and I'll sort of keep track of that. My apologies, I forgot to put that onto the recipe because I was self-typing that out from another recipe. So that's my fault. But I will make sure that y'all that we all get that in. Already looks like we're all doing pretty well. And again, keep it stirring. And if we're all doing well, I will head back to the history. So that is sort of like the original story of where Medivik's coming from. You know, there's been some debates on like the real origin of this food, whether it's coming from like some have said that it's how much baking soda? Just 1 teaspoon. And after we add that baking soda, we should see it start to foam up as well, but we haven't added it yet. I'm pretty sure we're all still melting butter. But So that's sort of like the original history, and some people have debated whether it's actually come from Eastern Europe or if it's from different parts of the world. Most people, I believe, agree that it is from, or it is very chunky butter, right? I'm still melting this stuff in this pot here. But most people are sort of believe that it's sort of from that Eastern European area. Go ahead and break my bacon. So that's sort of during still the phases of like the monarchy, or the monarchy that was in Russia, and still many of the people are sort of serving as serfs. They're on farms as sort of peasants. Now, food availability sort of changes once we get once the communist revolution passes. So that's sort of when at first it's sort of like still not as food's still not as available as some places in the West. Like in the West, in the West, you'd see like a bunch of different canned products. You'd see there was a larger availability of food due to like the sort of heavily industrialized nature. They've had like sort of a head start on the industry road, but Russia's still sort of lagging behind at this point. So while the West has sort of a bunch of different options, you can find any sort of a bunch of variety of canned goods in the store, and there's great access to you, even if you're on the lower end of sort of like the class scale at that time. There's a lot of variety available to you compared to past centuries. But in Russia, this is sort of less so. So once in the 1930s, some people were beginning to realize this. They're like, hey y'all, we're sort of behind on this in the food area. What do we do? We need to modernize it. So there were a few big figures who were sort of in this modernizing area, who were trying to get food out to the people. And one of the big names was Anastas Mikoyan. And Mikoyan was he was part of like the sort of government sort of like a food, like an agency for food, like sort of like the it's sort of an agency that was responsible for making sure everyone was kind of like they had their nutrition, they had all their food ready to them, sort of a part of that agency. And so he was. Oh, did we get a comment? I thought we saw a chat. 2 new messages. Butter's melted.
Butter melted.
Alrighty. Mine is almost melted here. It's still a little bit chunky. But once I get this all melted, I will move on to the next step. And it looks like it's about to be melted here. Okay. So, pause on the history. I'm going to move on to our baking soda step. So, I've got my baking soda here. And I'm going to do a little bit, just about 1 teaspoon. Excuse me. 1 teaspoon to our egg mixture. Excuse me again, sorry. The eggs mixture here. And I'm gonna dump that in. And we're gonna mix that in to our egg mixture. Now, y'all want to be sort of careful, or not careful, but you should just keep an eye out, because here it'll start to rise. Mine never gets it only gets like halfway up the pot though. So don't be worried about it overflowing, but just keep an eye on it and keep stirring it. And I'll go over that again. If your butter just melted, you're going to add a teaspoon of baking soda to your egg and honey mixture. It's going to be a teaspoon to the egg and honey mixture, and you're going to pour that in. Don't worry about sort of sprinkling it evenly. It'll all get sort of dispersed. You can mix it up from there. Just keep mixing. And it should start to rise as well. If yours is not rising, in like, and it's a little bit of a slower process, but if you give it like a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, and it's not rising, then you can add a little bit more baking soda, only a little bit. We're just going to keep on cooking this, and I'll give it one last time, the baking soda part. And if you want me to repeat any part of the recipe, just go ahead and ask. It's no problem. We want to add our teaspoon of baking soda to the egg and honey mixture that we've been heating. 1 teaspoon, and we're just gonna dump that in. Don't worry about dispersing it. It'll mix in all the same. And you're just gonna keep on stirring it. And it should start to rise as well. And if yours is not rising, you can go ahead and add a little bit more baking soda. Maybe like 1 more teaspoon, a half a teaspoon more. But that's only if it's not rising after a few minutes. Alrighty, are we all doing good too? Give a thumbs up if you're doing well. Nice, okay. Sorry if I'm missing any chats too. I'm a little new to Zoom meetings. Alrighty, I'm gonna head back to our history though. So we're gonna continue cooking this. And for those who have got, for those who have got their baking soda in, once it starts rising, you're gonna want to keep cooking it until it starts to gain a little bit of a brown color. You should start to see that soon. You can turn up the heat if it's just by a little bit, but we don't want to burn anything. Where we're gonna keep cooking until it can sort of we get a little bit more of a brown color. I will give you sort of what mine is looking like right now. So you see that in there? So it's a little bit darker, but that's sort of what mine is looking like right now. We're going to keep stirring it until it's a little bit darker. Yours is rising nice. Just keep on stirring it. This is sort of like the fussiest part of the recipe, really. And even then, it's not that bad. So it's a pretty forgiving recipe. There can definitely be some measurement mishaps, and it still turns out great. Keep stirring. Looking pretty good on time. While we're keeping this stirring and watching for brown color, I'm going to go back to history. So it's sort of so it's the beginning of sort of like the modernization of sort of food in the Soviet Union. And Anastas Mikoyan has he's kind of seen that we gotta do something about this to get the food out, because a lot of people we want to sort of get our food, we want to get on the level of the sort of West, because we've been falling behind. And so he started, and this is, I think, pretty funny. He was a big proponent and really shouted and rooted for ice cream in the Soviet Union, so much so that he would be creating like his own departments for ice cream quality control. And he was serious about his ice cream. He would like keep really tight control on ice cream production. He'd make sure that everything quality was all up to par. He was not letting any ice cream go under the standard. He was actually, and also mine is starting to turn brown right now. I'm just going to keep mixing. I'm going to mix a little faster too. But he was so sort of into the production of ice cream that Stalin actually commented saying that he cared more about ice cream than about communism. So he was a really big ice cream fan. I am too. I don't blame him. but he sort of spearheaded the production of ice cream there, and he made some progress too. But during the sort of 30s and 40s, again, the common person wasn't seeing many ice cream sundaes. You're sort of still on your older diet. Maybe some slight improvements, but food-wise, you're not seeing the ice cream quality control that McQueen is doing. Here, I'm gonna do another check. Yours guys is brown. Okay. So once yours turns brown, you're gonna take it off the heat. You want to get that off pretty immediately. And there can be variations in color. If you have like a really, really light brown, that's still fine. If you've got a dark brown, that's fine too. I've actually burnt this mixture before. Just a little bit, I've burnt it. And I was like, well, guess I'm rolling with it. This was like, I think a few years back, and it still tasted fine. So it is definitely very forgiving. But mine is not turned brown yet. Once yours is brown, for those who are sort of ahead with the brown mixture, you can, again, put it off the heat. And what you want to do is start gradually adding flour to it. So you're sort of adding bit by bit flour and mixing it in. If you want to wait as well for till I get to that step, y'all can too. But when it gets to start turning brown, it turns brown pretty quickly. Again, make sure you keep stirring. Keep it on a lower heat, medium low. Yours isn't brown yet, that's fine. It might take a little bit. Mine still is not yet. It's taken a bit, but it's starting to turn. And you don't want like a really deep brown. You're sort of looking for like a sort of lighter brown, almost like here. Mine is about to. I'll give you guys a little. You'll see here. Y'all can sort of see that. It's sort of a little darker than this shade. I'm not sure if it's showing through correctly with the light, but it's not going to be a really, really dark brown. It's going to be sort of a lighter brown. Mine is almost there though, but I will also wait for those people who do not have the brown color yet. And I think mine is getting there, so I'm going to take it off the heat. Oh, sorry. Let me rotate my camera so y'all can still see me. So I've got mine sort of brown now. And also a little bit thicker too. It should be a little bit thicker. It should sort of kind of make a plopping noise when you lift it up and bring it back down. And it's definitely a lot darker than our original. Or when we added the okay. Very light still, that's fine. Okay. So if yours is still very light at this point, you're gonna just keep cooking. If you want to, you can turn up the heat a little bit, but be cautious because it'll make it a little easier to burn on the bottom, but that just means you want to keep stirring it. So if you turn up the heat, just keep stirring. You might want to stir a little faster. But it's fine if yours is still a little light. I'm actually here. I'm about to. It also seems like that's good.
There's one person that just said theirs is very light.
Very light? Yeah, if yours is very here, if yours is very light, you can increase bump up the heat a little bit. But it's gonna be a lighter brown, but you can bump up the heat a little bit but keep it stirring pretty fast, okay, because you don't want to burn it on the bottom. Here's sort of like the color of mine. It's sort of reached a really sort of brownish, almost mustardy color. Sorry. Let me bring it from above. You sort of see that better? Let me put it in the light so it's brownish mustardy color.
Ovid, somebody said they burnt the bottom. Will it still turn out okay, or should they just start over later on their own?
If you burnt the bottom, that's fine. You want to just take it off the heat, and if you've got a sieve, you can strain that bottom. Or also, if you've got an immersion blender, you can, because I burnt the bottom before, but it wasn't too much, so I was able to sort of blend it all together. You can also sieve it through a strainer, if you've burnt the bottom, but because like I've burnt the bottom before, and I was able to just continue on with it, and it still tasted fine. So if you've got a burnt bottom and it's not too much of a burnt bottom, like you haven't like it's not the full thing that's burnt, then you can just keep going. But if it's the full thing that's burnt, like you've got 50% solid burnt and 50% or like almost like 60% solid burnt and like less that's like not, you might have to redo this step. But if not, and you're still looking at like a little bit burnt, then you're fine. You can just keep on going. Again, a very forgiving recipe. So don't worry too much about it if you've got a little bit of burnt. Is yours looking like it's a lot burnt or almost brown? All right, if it's almost brown, go ahead and take it off the heat because it'll still sort of cook through. But if you want to sort of like you want to just like because mine has turned a little bit more brown just from the residual heat that's come through. Only a little. All right, you're good. That's fine then. Because I made an oopsie one time. I did this and just absolutely burnt the bottom of the thing, and I was like scraping up. I'm like, oh no, what happened? I'm like, well, guess I gotta continue because I didn't have the ingredients to redo it, and so I was like, I guess I'm gonna keep going. And then it still turned out really well, which surprised me. But it's a very forgiving recipe, so you should be pretty fine. Alrighty. So mine is sort of brown a little more just from the residual heat. Nice. Almost like a caramel color. So how are we looking on the brown mixture? Again, we're looking for sort of a light mustardy caramel color, not like a deep brown, a light mustardy caramel color. Done? How much flour? So the flour, I've got both weight and cup measurements. You either want, it's 400 grams of flour or about 3 cups.
We're gonna need another half a cup.
We need another?
Yeah, because we did 2.5.
And so also for those that 4 cups also includes the amount you're sort of adding to sort of keep it like sort of the flour you keep on the board to keep it from sticking to the board. So we're gonna add a little bit by little bit until we've added almost half of the flour mixture. While it's still in the pot, we're gonna add a little bit of flour into the pot until we've got sort of like a scraggly, like a bit of dough, a little bit of dough that we can fold out or like we can bring out onto the tabletop. But we're gonna start here for those who have got the brown mixture. We're gonna start. I've got my flour here and here. I will move over to another work area so y'all can see better. Sorry, I gotta move around a little bit. Okay. All right. I'm gonna rotate this downward so y'all can see. So I've got my brown mixture right here, and you can sort of see the color there. It's a little sort of caramelly, almost kind of a darker mustard, a mustard brown and sort of a caramel color. And that's what we're sort of looking for. If you're a little light or a little darker than that, no, you do not keep it on the heat without any flour. You can just go ahead and take it off the heat once you've got the brown color. You want to take it off the heat. So yeah, you'll just take it off the heat to add the flour, and we'll be done with the stove. So you can go ahead and turn your stoves off once you've got that sort of brown color in your eggs. Alrighty, so I'm gonna rotate this down. I'm gonna add flour bit by bit. So I've got my 400 grams, almost, or 3 cups here. I'm gonna add just a little bit, tiny bit in here, and then I'm gonna stir. So not too much, just a little bit. And it doesn't matter how much you're adding, as long as you're adding not thirds at a time. As long as you're doing sort of like little sprinkles at a time, then you're good. And I will show you here in a second how much that sprinkle is. So here you can see again, I've got my bowl here of flour. I'm gonna do just a little sprinkle. And that's all. Okay. How are we all looking? Are we all doing good? Thumbs up if you're doing well on this part. Nice, thumb. Alrighty. Anyone who's a little bit behind, go ahead and put that in the chat if you're a little bit behind. I think we're doing well on time, but I'm gonna move a little bit faster here. Okay. So I'll continue giving some of these steps, and then I'm gonna go back to the stream. Okay. So you're gonna continue adding your flour in little increments until you've sort of got a dough that's almost like a dough that can still be moved, even if it's a little wet. You've still got sort of a dough there that is not like, it's not a batter anymore. So once you've got that dough, you can bring it out onto like a floured work surface, and the flour that we included in the 400 grams or 3 cups of flour that we have here. Yeah, sort of like a pizza dough. If it's like a pizza dough, if it's a little wetter or a little drier, that's fine. As long as you've got sort of like that pizza dough consistency. You're gonna roll it out onto a floured work surface, and you're gonna begin sort of kneading to combine that, kneading like this, or just mixing it with your hands to combine all that flour. And by the time you've got it into a dough form and you've mixed in all that flour, it should only be warm, so it won't hurt your fingers. But still, just display some caution when using it, because mine has never been too hot to handle with my hands, but there may be an off chance. So just feel it, make sure it's not too hot to handle. Alrighty. And again, once you've got it into like a pizza dough form in the pot, you're going to roll it out onto a floured work surface, and you're going to start mixing the rest of that flour in. And another tip, just for people, if your thing is, after you've mixed everything together, if yours is still looking too dry, you could just add a small splash of water, keep adding those until you've got sort of a nicer, like, again, pizza dough consistency, maybe a little drier than pizza dough. And if yours is looking a little too wet, you can do the opposite, add a little flour. But since we're looking all right, I'm gonna go ahead back to our history, if y'all are okay with that. So I stopped at about the ice cream production. Very fun. So Anastas Mikoyan, as well as sort of creating this ice cream, he created a cookbook. And because this was sort of in high demand, at least by sort of head officials, they were saying, create the cookbook they sort of wanted to have like a collective, they wanted to get all sort of the recipes from like all different Eastern European countries into one big cookbook. They can sort of say, this is like our cuisine. And so Mikoyan sort of headed this project, and he was he sort of oversaw how it went. And he was able to make a good cookbook, but unfortunately it wasn't too well received by the people. because the average person at this time, they don't live in like they're not living like the high life with like all these mixers and stuff that they're calling for. They don't have mixers or much like that. They're sort of like the common people who are working the farms and stuff, or people who are like working in the factories. They don't have like electric mixers and sort of complicated and expensive equipment like that. So this sort of it was falling on people who didn't really, they sort of looked down upon the cookbook. They saw it too as like sort of it was sort of like too much it was aimed more towards like the upper class, or like the bureaucratic, like the people who worked in government positions, rather than sort of the common person who was working on the farm. And so it was sort of like it did sort of pass over them, and it was sort of designed without their conditions sort of in mind. But that was just for the 1940s. And in the 1950s, this book was sort of it was revised, but also the people started coming out with like,
somebody asked if it should be crumbly.
should it be crumbly? It should not, but that's fine if it's a little crumbly. There's an easy solution. You just want to add a little bit of water until you've got it back into a nice dough. So if yours is crumbly, that's totally fine. Mine gets a little crumbly too, but I just add some water and keep on kneading it until we get back to a pizza dough-like consistency. And also sometimes if it's crumbly, just like, and you've been, sometimes when it's crumbly, there's like little pockets of wet parts, like little pockets of the mixture we've been cooking that are still a little wet compared to the other dry parts. But if you keep kneading it together, it starts to take on that pizza dough consistency. But again, another thing for crumbliness is just adding a little bit of water. It brings it all together again. So yeah. So again, if yours is crumbly, don't worry about it sort of being messed up. You can just add a little water. But going back to some of the history, this cookbook really in the 50s, post-war, because World War II, you weren't seeing many delicacies and electric mixers in people's households. Post-World War II in the 50s and 60s, this cookbook really took off. And it had sort of like revisions done to it. And it has like a really interesting, sort of funny name. Let me bring it up here on my thing. It was called the Book of Tasty and Healthy Food. And that's I don't know, I think the name's pretty funny, I would definitely enjoy a cookbook of healthy and tasty food, I'm sure everyone wants that cookbook, but despite its name, it sold still a lot of it had a lot of fans in the Soviet Union, and this sort of prompted everyone else to start. Oh, we got a new message. Sorry, I did not see that. Are we supposed to be doing anything with the dough yet? Once on the floured surface. So once it's on the floured surface, if you've got like a pizza dough consistency, like if it's like not dry or not too wet, then you can just leave it like that. If it's too wet, you want to sort of like, if you've got extra flour on the surface, begin incorporating that flour into your dough. If you've got sort of if it's a little too wet, if it's a little too wet, add a little extra flour. If it's a little too dry, then add some more water. If it's a little, if it's like a pizza dough, you're good then. A little drier than pizza dough, but yeah. And I'm still adding my flour here. I've not yet turned it out onto the work surface, so I think I might be a little behind here. Sorry, y'all. But so this cookbook sort of prompted other people to start publishing other cookbooks. So like others were sort of like they were like, now that we've seen the success of the Book of Tasty and Healthy Food, we're going to start publishing our own sort of cookbooks. And Anastas Mikoyan, the person who made the cookbook back in the 1930s, thick applesauce. Okay, so if yours is like a thick applesauce, it's still a little wet, keep adding that flour. But yeah, you're still good if you've got like a thick applesauce. Just keep going with that flour. Yeah, you're good. And if you've used up all 3 cups of flour, you can add a little more if yours is still looking a little too wet, but just sort of add it piecemeal after you've added the allotted amount. But Mikoyan is sort of he did the ice cream, so he did the touting of ice cream as well as the cookbook, but he's also sort of in other places too in the food production sphere. He's a really interesting person. And his brother actually is his younger brother was actually a jet manufacturer. He founded a sort of like a company that produced jets for them, and actually the most successful jets for the Soviets. So I guess fighter jets and cake and ice cream run in the family. So they go hand in hand. Yeah, mine has still got that thick applesauce like yours. But I'm gonna keep mixing. It gets a little tough to mix in here actually. Once it gets a little tough, I'm probably gonna actually turn this out now onto the floured surface. How are we all looking, by the way, on our dough part? Still mixing it on flour? Yep, that's where I am too. All right, I'm gonna try not to get flour on my computer. I'm gonna sort of turn this down here so y'all can sort of see my cutting board. So I'm gonna turn this out now. It's still a little bit wet. That's fine. I'm gonna try and get as much dough as possible on here. Okay. Let me roll my sleeves up. Dough is done. Okay. So for the person who has the dough done, and if anyone else has dough done, so I am not at that point yet, but I will tell you all what to do. So I'm gonna keep talking, but I'm gonna wash my hands. So if your dough is done, you're going to want to take it and make it into one sort of big circle, and you're going to want to divvy up that circle into 8 equal pieces, and these are going to be sort of our layers. So you're going to take it and you're going to divvy it up into 8 equal pieces. Once you've got 8 pieces, you're going to roll those. You're going to, with your hands, cup them into sort of like a sphere, little circle. And then once you've got 8 equal spheres, you're going to take them, plop them on your floured surface, and each one you're going to roll out as thin as you can. Sometimes if you go too thin, it sort of breaks in the middle, but you're going to roll them out pretty thin. And you're going to take like a bowl. I've got this size bowl. If you're able to run it out thinner, then you can use a bigger sort of like a cake mold. But this size bowl works for me. And I'm going to just use it to cut out perfect circles. Also save your scraps too from the circles, because we're not going to roll them into new dough spheres, but we're going to use them for decorating later. And it looks like time might be running a little short here. So if we do run a little short, I will give you all this sort of what you need to keep going in the last few minutes. So okay. So once you've got your dough done, just roll it, get it into 8 equal pieces, and then take those pieces and roll them out, and then cut them out into perfect circles. Make sure you roll them out as thin as you can. If you don't get them too thin, that's still fine too. I'm gonna roll my sleeves up here and get to mixing this dough. So the dough, it may be a little greasy. There was a bit of butter in there, so that butter may get like on some stuff. So one thing, you'll just flour your hands up on the surface you're working on, and that should keep sort of that grease from going out. But it should be pretty greasy, but it shouldn't be. Once you get your dough finished, it shouldn't be like really. It should be wet. It should be sort of like a pizza dough, but it might be a little bit greasy.
There was a question if you could show how to roll out the dough.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let me put my camera down here. So can you all, there we go. I think that shows it pretty well. So I've got a rolling pin here. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use anything that's sort of any sort of cylinder-like thing that you can put pressure on. But again, yeah, if you don't have one of these, you can just use any sort of thing that you can put pressure on. It's like a cylinder shape, and you're just going to. And even if you don't have one of those, you can just pat it out with your fingers. But mine isn't as solid right now. But we're going to roll it out like this, and you want to get it into a thin sheet. So you want to get into a thin, probably really as thin as you can. Like it's going to be a few millimeters thin. And then once you've got it really thin, even if it's in a rugged shape, we're going to cut it out. What size circles? So I'm using, this is probably about a 6 or 7 inch wide bowl. If you get yours thinner, you can use like a 9-inch cake pan, but this 6 or 7 inch bowl works well for me. So I just take it and I will cut like this. I'll press it down. Pretend this is sort of already rolled out. I'll press it down, and once I've got it pressed down, I feel it cuts through the dough. I'm going to lift it back up, and I'm going to peel away the scraps. Does it sort of answer y'all's questions? Yeah, mine is looking a little too wet here, so I might add a little bit more flour. Thinner than 3 millimeters. It can be if you can get it thinner than 3 millimeters, yeah, but sometimes if you get it really thin, it breaks holes. So probably stay around 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters, 2 millimeters, but going thinner than that might be a little bit dangerous. And if you do break holes in it, that's fine. You can just roll it back up again, and you can roll it back up into a little sphere again, and then start over rolling out. Mine is sort of turning into a nice dough here. I'm going to knead out. Alrighty. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and preheat ovens to 350 as well. And then while they're preheating, we're going to cover the dough up and start doing our filling. And the filling's really easy. It's just mixing two things together. You don't have to do any cooking for the filling. So sort of once you got your dough all rolled out, the steps after that are really easy. So mine is looking pretty good here. I might add a little bit more flour here. So for those who have already got theirs rolled out, while the oven is preheating, just go ahead and you're going to want to get a parchment lined baking sheet. And it's possible to it is possible, but that's neat if you're using like an electric stand mixer and you've got a kneading attachment. It'll just if you need it for like a really like 10 minutes with that, or like 20 minutes with that by hand, it's only if you're kneading like 30 minutes straight. So to build like enough gluten to really like make it too overworked, you'd have to be kneading for a long time. So if you're hand working it, you should be fine as long as it's mixed. If you're using an electric mixer, make sure you're just not sort of kneading it for too long. Okay. So yeah, but it is definitely harder to overwork than than other breads or doughs. But I will go back to a little bit of the history, and then after I finish up with the history section and answering some of the questions, then I will tell you all what to the final steps. So it's the 50s right now in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, and people are sort of beginning to publish a lot more recipes. And so in Ukraine, there's some officials publish the cookbook Ukrainian Dishes. That's what it's called. And in this, and beforehand, Medovik was sort of like it's a home dish, so it's not widespread as much as other dishes. So it's only in the home. It's not in many cookbooks. But this dish or this cookbook from Ukraine sort of popularized the version of Medovik we know today in Eastern Europe. And so once it was published by the cookbook, it spread like wildfire. Many people made it at home, and it was sort of like a thing that everyone knew. It's sort of like, a birthday cake if someone was coming over for like a tea party. You serve this sort of cake here. It became really popular. And so once it got really popular, it sort of stayed. Its heyday was really in the 60s, and it sort of stayed popular all the way till modern day, where many sort of former Soviet countries still sort of sell Medovik in stores, or people still make it at home. It's still sort of a popular dish today. But those are sort of the roots of Medovik, the honey cake, and it's made in it's less homemade now and more sort of in restaurants, but people still make it homemade. But restaurants do sort of all these takes on it, like some with banana, some with I mentioned some of these earlier. Some with banana, some with sort of nuts, with peanut butter, with chocolate. They do a bunch of different versions of it. So that is sort of the end of our history section. And I've got my dough here, but it seems like we're running a little low on time. So for everyone here, I'm going to sort of give the rest of our steps in detail from our dough cutting to our final assembly. Okay, so I've only got my dough like this, but I will give the rest of the steps. So once you've got your dough, it's sort of like a pizza dough-like consistency. You are going to want to cut it into 8 equal pieces. And again, you're going to take these pieces, you're going to bring them into a circle, and then you're going to roll them out, and you're going to cut them with some sort of some size bowl or cake pan, whatever will fit for that. And once you've got those pieces all rolled out and cut out, you're going to place them onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. You might have to do 2 rounds in the oven. And again, you're going to want to have your oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And while you're waiting for it to preheat, if it's still preheating, you can go ahead and do your filling, which is just sweetened condensed milk here. I've got this size can. I'm pretty sure this size can is standardized across the US. You're going to use about 1/3 or 1/2. I usually use 1/3. Taste it to see if it's sweet enough for you, and then if it is, you could just keep it at 1/3. If it's not, you can go ahead and add 1/2. So sour cream wise, this is the amount of sour cream that they've said that the recipe has said. I like to use about half of this and combine sort of the sweetened condensed milk with that. So about 1/3 of the can of sweetened condensed milk, and about a little over half of this. And depending on the consistency and how your dough tastes or how your filling tastes, you can add more sour cream or more sweetened condensed milk. It should be a little bit runny, depending on if you've got like if you've got Dole, I think that, or not Dole, the common sort of sour cream brand, it may be a little bit more runny. That's fine. It sort of hardens in the fridge. But you're going to take your sour cream and you're just going to mix it. You're going to get sort of like a runny, should still be pretty thick, but it'll be a little runny. And if yours is runnier than you sort of thought it would be, that's still fine. You're going to mix those two, and you're going to just pop it in the fridge while the rest of your stuff is baking. Once you've got once you've got the scraps and so the scraps are just the part that you cut out, not the circle, but the stuff, the extra stuff from what you cut out. You're gonna take those scraps, you're gonna bake them too, as along with the circles that you've cut out, and once you bake them, they should go for about 8 to 12 minutes, leaning more on the longer side, the 12-minute side. And they should sort of be like they should have browned a little more. Once you've got those, you're gonna just take them out and let them cool down, as well as the scraps. For what you do with these scraps, excuse me, you take the scraps, you can either mash them by hand or with some sort of like potato masher, or you can use a rolling pin, or if you've got a food processor. I've got a food processor here, but you don't have to use a food processor. You can use any means necessary to mash them up. You're just gonna mash them up into sort of a powder. That it can be a little chunkier, it can be a little finer, but you're gonna mash it up into a powder. So once you've got that powder, you're going to you're going to put that on the side, and you're going to start assembling alternating layers. You're going to put a layer of the baked cake, the baked circles, and then you're going to drizzle a layer of filling and spread that around, then circle, then filling, and then you're going to do that until you get to the top where you top it with filling. And then the final step is you're going to want to toss the sides with put some of that powder stuff on the top and on the sides, and it'll stick to the sides and on the top. And I'll actually show everyone a picture of what the live making board looks like. This is what mine looked like. Here, I will lift the camera up. This is what mine looked like before. Some bites were already taken out of it. So those are sort of the inner layers. That's what it looks like. And to serve, you're going to drizzle it with honey as well. So I'm going to stay here. It looks like we're about at time. If anyone has any extra questions, you all can go ahead and oh, sorry, my bad. I did not know. Let me show you all again. Is that a little easier to, yeah, I think that's a little more stable here. There we go. Okay. And you can drizzle a little bit of that filling on top. And again, the filling might be a little bit runny.
So before you all go, does anybody have any additional questions for Ovid as you kind of finish this up on your own?
Yeah, any questions? I'd be happy to answer. And I'm not sure if there's a way to contact after is there a way to contact after the Zoom meeting ends for questions?
Yeah, they all have our emails. And then we do this for 4 more weeks, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just email us. We're happy to answer.
Yeah, I'll be constantly going through and refreshing my emails, and I'll be quick to respond. So if you've got any questions, please shoot them. I'd be glad to respond to y'all.
Okay, well, if nobody has any additional questions, I am going to stop recording.